me in the past that you want to be the Netflix or the Amazon of the real world, and that they're very good at kind of suggestions based on discovery and behavioral targeting. Can you talk a little bit more about that philosophy and kind of what we can expect along those lines?
Sure. So yeah, that's indeed one of my favorite analogies. Netflix has done such a great job knowing who you are and what movies you've seen in the past. They can now recommend really smart movie recommendations to you. And of course, Amazon is killer at that as well for products. So yeah, indeed, we're trying to do that for the real world and using the same principles, which is data analysis and looking at all of these different data sources that I talked about. So we'll continue to hone that engine. It's actually a hugely complicated and interesting mathematical challenge. It's not easy to execute.
Sure.
And it'll take us, I'm sure we'll be iterating it for years. But version 1 we're very, very happy with. I think to answer your question, the mathematical analysis of data is one part of discovery, but I think there's other really interesting, useful additional areas that we'll continue to mine and productize. And in particular, I'm thinking about social discovery and advice and recommendations from experts.
Sure.
Because on one hand, you can do all sorts of amazing mathematical analysis, but at the same time, sometimes you can never quite replicate that insight from the person who knows Chicago better than anyone else out there, or the person who's lived for 6 months in Paris, and so they're the ones to tell you the best cafes to go when you're there. So we're thinking a lot about how to identify and celebrate experts within the Foursquare community, and invite them to share their expertise.
Sure.
So if you have in your mind, because you're a crazy avid bowler, the best 10 bowling alleys in the West Coast, we want you to be able to share that kind of information with the Foursquare community. So maybe it's a little bit broad, but I'm hinting at some of the discovery-type products that we're building now.
Good. And that gets to some of David Weinberger's points in the last session. So let's move on to kind of the merchant or advertiser end of the equation. You mentioned you have 250, what was the number?
Over 250,000.
250,000, and that's ramped up quite quickly from last year. Do you have any sense of how that breaks down in terms of national brands or regional franchises versus kind of mom and pops? Any sense of that?
It's pretty evenly split.
Okay.
So a big chunk of it, of course, is chains, and we count in that 250,000 number. We're counting, all 3,000 Radio Shacks or what
Sure.
have you. So, it's a good mix.
Okay.
And in terms of our interest going forward and our strategy going forward, it's we want to build products and focus on both constituencies.
Yep.
Because that's how users' experiences in the real world are pretty evenly divided, right? It's both the local proprietor and the big national chain. So they have very different needs, of course, and it's hard to service both constituencies product-wise and marketing and selling to them, but we want to do both.
Now, the kind of local SMB sales kind of discussion is very close to the heart of a lot of the companies and the individuals in this room. I think with your most recent round of new specials that are kind of more templated than they were in the past, I think it's an easier value proposition for your average merchant to kind of answer that question of how do I use or leverage Foursquare. I think that it brings some clarity to the table. Now, in terms of clarity, in terms of reaching these small businesses, I think that you have a pretty, again, clear value proposition in actually driving intangible foot traffic. You can compare that to some of the other things that have been sold into this sector in the past, such as clicks, paid search advertising, which is, to some businesses a little bit more opaque. So I think that to some degree you have that clarity on your side when you're talking about self-service. To augment that in the future, we've talked about, somewhat of an interest, nothing definite yet, to work with, local resellers. Can you talk about, the possible kind of augmenting of your sales strategy in that respect?
Sure. So, excuse me. So indeed, first of all, our existing platform for interacting with SMBs is our self-service platform. It's simply foursquare.com/businesses. And that's where we direct SMBs and big chains to go and sign up for Foursquare. It's good and it's generated a lot of activity, but it's not enough for us as a business as we scale in the coming years. So we're thinking a lot about different channel strategies, and one of them for sure is trying to figure out how we can work with partners who already have pre-existing sales channels, pre-existing relationships in local communities to distribute Foursquare specials. very much in the oven still, being
Right.
baked. So we don't have any particular announcements now, but it's very much on our minds. We're very eager to try unique and innovative sales strategies as opposed to from day one trying to hire a 500-person sales force.
Sure.
So we think we can move quicker with partners.
And in the meantime, you've done some clever kind of interim solutions, or I don't mean to downplay it by saying interim, but your local ambassador program is kind of neat. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So indeed, one of the thoughts we had was kind of crowdsourcing our sales efforts, if that's the way to put it. So, and we did this a little bit in reaction to all sorts of interest and passion from some of our super users who wanted to go out into their communities and convert merchants and bring them onto Foursquare. So we've created a program called the Foursquare Ambassador Program, where we give local super users and fans a set of cards that say, I'm a Foursquare ambassador, has a specific code on it. They go into their local communities and try and cajole their favorite merchants and venues to come onto Foursquare. And when the merchant does it, they type in a code so that we know it comes from Joe in Dallas or what have you. Nice. So it's a nice way to empower our community and get the benefit of their excitement.
Sure. Now, in terms of how companies can work with you, there's kind of a spectrum of options, some of them being low barrier than the kind of long-term prospect of having an actual sales channel relationship in place. Media partners that can utilize your API, pull in some of your content and some of the engagement that's happening there. What is that spectrum, or what's the snapshot in as brief as you can put it?
Yeah, sure. So we have a very open and robust API. It's read and write. It's super easy to use. We modeled it after Twitter, so it's very open, and we want people to be able to do anything and everything with it. So that's a very easy way for third parties to partner with Foursquare and implement cool things. And then, as we just talked about, coming to Foursquare.com/businesses, there's a whole set of tools there for the merchant to sign up for Foursquare, verify, get access to those venue stats that I mentioned. Lastly, we do deeper partnerships with certain national merchants and brands, and those are pretty one-off. Some of them are around custom badges, sure, which, for example, we did with Starbucks. And again, for merchants who go to Foursquare.com/businesses, there's sort of a whole set of instructions on how they can try and work with Foursquare that way.
Sure. So we don't have that much time left. I want to ask you one more question related, just kind of panning back from almost a cultural standpoint. I think the one thing that Foursquare, Groupon, and a number of other companies have kind of ignited in the kind of tech and media worlds is this, the concept of deals in general. I mean, it used to be, it carried a cultural stigma, clipping coupons, both on the user end and the merchant end, just in kind of cheapening whatever the product is or that kind of thing. So, partly a result of coming out of recession, partly a result of being associated with hip companies like Groupon and Foursquare, it's now a very hot area. So what more do you have to say about deals in general? And not only that, but one thing that I don't think has been utilized to its potential, which is to bring together group buying with mobile. Groupon is great, but it has a 24-hour clock and a redemption cycle that's weeks long, instead of the ability to create flash mobs. And you've done that to some degree with your kind of swarm specials and flash. But what about that concept of bringing those two things together in categories that are conducive to dynamic levels of inventory, restaurants, happy hours, things like that? Yeah,
no, I think that's huge potential, and we're very excited about that. We think we're sitting in a great position to mine those kind of opportunities, flash mobs and group buying dynamics in a mobile atmosphere. Yeah. So that's a little bit behind some of our special launches last week, and certainly we'll be doing more in the future. To your initial point about coupons becoming cool,
right.
I think it's an interesting point, and sure, the whole category is being reinvented, but I do think there's still the danger of coupons being a little bit marginalized and declassé if it's overwhelmingly all about the 80% off, or I buy a $100 spa treatment for $50 and then I never come back. So some of the big front end customer acquisition models like Groupon and the next 400 imitators are interesting to watch. I'm not so sure that they're how sustainable and how deep the demand is, because it's attracting kind of a weak, super discount hunting
customer acquisition, but it's the wrong customer. It's not the customer you want.
Yeah, so we
or the argument goes that way.
We're thinking more about loyalty. Sure. We want to help merchants get people to come 5 and 10 and 20 times, not just that first time. So, I think that's a different way to look at the puzzle.
Sure. Well, I'm sure we have a lot to look forward to. I have a lot of faith in you and your team and everything you guys have built. Big fan. So please join me in thanking Evan.
Thanks so much.